I want to tell my story real quick. Some of you have actually been asking, why are you here? Like, what? You're so young. I get that a lot. The truth is, I got a lot of experience with this because I started doing this when I was 15 years old. I started leading young men, my peers. And so I want to talk to you about that for a second. So 10 years ago, almost to the day, I got a phone call that changed my life. And that phone call was from CNN. I was 21 at the time, so do the math. And I was a senior at Southern Methodist University, which again is lovingly referred to as Southern Millionaires University. I was not one of those kids. I was in a beat-up pickup truck. They asked me to come in for an interview on CNN Live about the organization I mentioned, Men with Integrity. And on the air, I said, and I want to read this, it's a quote. I went and found the transcript. Men should be the ones who stand up to say, let's stop sexism and sexual assault. Let's make a difference. I was so naive. I loved this part of me. And let's help these women who we call our mothers, our sisters, our girlfriends, our cousins, our friends. Men have to be the ones who stand up alongside women. And that they shouldn't be afraid. Because there are other men with integrity in every group of men. And I really believed that. The interview ended 7 minutes later, and I walked out, and I had just, I was on a high. I had just been interviewed on CNN Live. I felt like my life was sort of at this peak moment. And I had just said my truth out loud. I'd been as authentic as I could be, and you can go and look this up at some point. I said sexism is a men's issue. And men with integrity, I believe, could solve it. And I went home, and I thought, how could anyone argue with that, right? And people did. I checked my email inbox, and sitting there were a few dozen emails from viewers already. I'd already gotten back. And most of those emails were from men, and those men were angry. Those men were angry. And they told me that I was ruining masculinity. A few told me in no uncertain terms that I was going to be silenced. They had my address. They threatened not just me, but the people I loved, my family, my girlfriend. It was really terrifying. And in that moment, confronted with death threats from that dark side of masculinity, that shadow we talked about, I felt that true existential terror. And I started asking myself, am I ready to die? Am I ready to lay my life on the line? Not my business, not my job, not my friend, not my relationship with my father, but my life. Am I willing to put it all on the line for this thing? And I ran away because it was terrifying. But in that moment when I thought that, am I ready? And the answer was no. The other question I had was, what would it take for society to be ready? For this message to be received? What would it take? And and I imagine, I love looking at this stuff because I have documents throughout my whole life of writing all this stuff down. And it feels naive and hopeful and optimistic and beautiful. And I love that part of myself. And I love that I'm here today 10 years later. And I want to tell you a little bit about this. So I imagined a decade ago that real change would start to happen when we did two things. One, we have to make it acceptable, even cool, to talk about masculinity in new ways. Not just be manly, be tough, like in new ways, right? And the second thing is we have to raise the way our culture values women. Raise it. So it's been a decade, and some things have changed. For the first thing, we're here, we're talking about masculinity, and it's kind of cool, right? Thank you. In fact, last year I got to go to Michael Kimmel's conference and I got to speak there. And I got to appear on Huff Post Live, and I said basically the same thing I said a decade ago a little more advanced because I'd spent some time studying and being in it, but basically the same message. And when I came home that day, I had an inbox full of love notes. How can I get involved? You're doing something that's so important. You're so right. I'm so on your team. I did a TED Talk. I did that same conversation. I want to talk to you guys over here too. I had the same conversation at a TED Talk, and I got out onto the foyer, and everybody was there. Oh yeah, that's so right. I had guys from the Mankind Project. I'm not even in the Mankind Project. I had guys coming up from the Mankind Project saying, have you seen that we're doing this? We're having a conversation about masculinity. And I was like, okay, things have changed in this one area. But that second area, and we're here, and we're talking about how to close that pay equity and equality gap for women. We're raising the way women are valued, and some of the companies in this room are doing that in a major way. Thank you. We're still not there yet. And if you haven't read McKinsey and Lean In's report, which I think the new one is getting worked on right now, if you haven't read that, it makes a pretty compelling case for how our global economy is suffering a $28 trillion opportunity cost every year. To put that in perspective, that's 9 United States-sized economies every year that is just going left. We're writing it off as we have that gender equality gap laid bare. But we have a new problem. And for me, and for the millennials in the back, and the largest part of the millennial generation, the cool talk is not enough. We are impatient. I am extremely impatient. We are chafing under the bit of an outdated culture and an outdated economy. And I get to be the angry one. And we're disenfranchised by our companies, and we're disavowing our brands that don't get it.